Welcome, everyone. It is Tuesday, January 28th, 2020. It is 5:15, and the Carroll City Council meeting is now in session. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please note the attendance question will be here. The first item we have this evening is the consent agenda, which is approval of the minutes of the January 13th, 20th, and 22nd meetings. Approval of bills and claims. Under licenses and permits, we have the renewal of a Class C beer permit with Class B wine permit, includes carryout wine and native wine and Sunday sales for Dollar General Store number 2756. We have renewal of a Class B liquor license with outdoor service and Sunday sales, Charlie's Steakhouse, Swizzle Stick Lounge, Carrollton Center. We also have the FFA farm lease agreement for 2020, and the Merchants Park lease for Carroll Merchants Baseball for 2020, and the ash tree removal project for 2020. Are there any questions or comments about the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda. Second.
We have a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, we'll go ahead and vote, please.
Seaman? Yes. Haley?
Yes.
Cox?
Yes.
Fleshner?
Yes.
Dirks?
Yes.
Hayes? Motion approved.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is oral requests and communications from the audience for items not on the agenda. If not, we have the next item is a proclamation for Camp Keesum. States, whereas Keesum is a nationwide community driven by passionate college student leaders that supports children through and beyond their parents' cancer, and whereas Keesum's flagship program, called Camp Keesum, operates for free camps for children who have been impacted by parents' cancer, and whereas for many children, their camp experience is a life-changing event and provides them with a community of children with similar experiences and a safe and welcoming environment. And now therefore, I, Eric P. Jensen, Mayor of the City of Carroll, do hereby encourage the citizens of Carroll to reach out to Camp Keesum via their website, www.campkeesum.org, and support Keesum's vision of ensuring that every child impacted by a parent's cancer is never alone. I'd like to thank Mike Cox for bringing that forward. Thank you, sir.
Just as a side note, Cole Moore, who graduated with one of my sons, is a student over at University of Iowa. He's the one that approached me with this. His parents are still members of this community, so that's why he asked if we would support it.
And then I gave you that, take that. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you.
The next item is ordinances, and we have the Carroll City Ordinance, Chapter 69.088 Amendment, 30-minute Kemper parking request. And Brad, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We had received requests from the Kemper schools to add a 30-minute parking space on Clark Street. It's the farthest north parking space on Clark Street in the 100 block of South Clark. This space is to allow for quick access, I guess, to the schools when needed by visitors for a short period of time. They do have another space down the road, which is a little different for their pickup for their preschooler after-school event program, I think. So this is something similar they have requested, and it is just one spot between the hours of 7:30 and 4:30 Monday through Friday, school days only. So I bring this to you to discuss, and I guess you can waive all three or listen to one reading and see what happens from there. So this is the first that's got out to the public, so I don't know if anyone's made contact with anybody about it.
So this came from Kemper, not any parents? Right?
No, this came from, it came from John Steffes.
Okay. I think, and we have, did they have one added a couple of years ago?
We did, We did a parking change at Northwest Street at St. Lawrence. And
okay.
the 15-minute one, I don't recall when that was.
Okay.
That might have been 5+ years ago. Yeah, that one might have been longer than before. That's on the southernmost part of the 100 block of South Clark Street.
We worked with them before that on the east side of the building also.
I believe I think there's a 30-minute parking on that side also. There's a few different parking request changes that have happened throughout the years there.
And it just be 30 minutes during the hours of school?
7:30 to 4:30, yep, school days only, Monday through
So
Friday.
then after 4:30, they could park there unlimited, correct?
Normally, yeah.
Okay, alright.
Talking with John, the way I understood it was to just allow access for visitors to the school that are gonna be there for less than 30 minutes. So people that are dropping off, picking stuff up, salespeople, that type of stuff.
I know they have one, I think they're right between St. Angela's and Holy Spirit. They got one on their street.
There's a sign there that says that.
Yeah.
I'm assuming there's an ordinance with that one. I don't know for sure.
And so it'd be a sign similar to that would sit in front of that.
The sign will read 30-minute parking, 7:30 to 4:30, Monday through Friday, school days only.
Okay.
And then the streets department will get that installed once the weather clears up.
This seems pretty straightforward to me, but in the spirit of letting people vet it out a little bit, I would move to waive the first 2 readings of the ordinance.
Did you say the first or the first two?
First 2.
First two, okay.
There's a motion on the floor.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? We'll go ahead and vote, please.
Cox?
Yes.
Seaman? Dirk?
Yes.
Haley?
Yes.
Base? Yes. Fleischner?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. So you bring that back to the next meeting. Okay, thank you. The next item under resolutions is report of bid opening. Carroll Youth Sports Lighting Project 2020, and Jack, please.
Thank you, Mayor. On January 20th, 4 proposals were received at the time of the bid opening. The lowest bid was Dries Electric Company of Carroll. Their base bid of $296,000 is for fields 4 and 6, and the alternate bid was $141,000 for field 7 for a total bid price of $437,000. When we allocated money almost 3 years ago, when we got the estimates about 3 years ago, $375,000 was about close to going back today, even looking at numbers. That was a good budget, but we've gotten through a couple of years with the other lights, so and interest is accrued on that money. So we have expenses of debt issuance and design services, which is $28,108 minus the $390,000. We have $361,891.87 available at this present time. And then if you accept option A, which is the base bid, funds available after would be $65,891.87. Option B is to add the alternate of field 7. We have a shortfall of $75,108. And talking with Mike and Laura, available funds of local option sales tax and hotel motel tax to cover the shortfall. And that would be our recommendation, is to take the option B, do all 3 fields for the total bid price of $437,000. And I did attach the bid sheet that we did with Shive Hattery typed this up for us. We had 3 real competitive bids. If you saw, one a little bit higher. With that, a letter of recommendation from Shive Hattery for Dries Electric, and then the map. This is a newer map that shows the 2 T-ball fields that I believe at budget last week when I presented. I talked about the additional 2 fields. That was really a request from the community to bring T-ball from the adult softball fields out to the youth sports complex, because if parents have multiple kids, they can be at one location together. But when you have 5:30 games and you have 8 fields going, 9 fields. Imagine 9, 10, or 12, 11, 12 players. Parents a lot of times at 5:30 drive separately. You have a lot of cars out there. And we really need the fields for the next set of games where we can turn on the lights, just to really get our program done when families want to be done shortly around 4th of July. Having 2 fields, yes, we can make anything work, but it's not going to be ideal. It's going to be a lot of work. Playing times when maybe it's not ideal. And one thing Joel brought up to me, which we talked about earlier today when we were talking about it, one of the requests we get with summer swim team is they have meets on Tuesday, Thursday evenings. Try to avoid that. We can't do that a lot of times, but in order to even try this, we would need to have the lights on all 3 fields. So, and since this was a few years ago, we have a software program now that Grant can implement and Joel to put in some of those scenarios to try to avoid certain nights and do things, but we really need all 3 fields lit to get this done.
The funds are available.
The council would have to
Doing a-
allocate out of hotel, motel, local office sales tax, and then that would require a budget amendment later in the year.
Later in the year.
With the $75,000 coming out of loss in hotel motel, are we still okay for other budgeted items along the way?
We would be okay. What I would suggest is you take 37,554.07 out of lost, and then the comparable amount of hotel, motel. So split it between the 2 funds.
Out of the current budget years, line
Correct.
20, okay,
Yep.
thanks.
And field 4 and 6 already are trenched, they just have to reroute the wires, or do they have to redo any of the wiring? Is that right?
There's conduit under there. We're not sure how good it is. And if they are able to save some of the conduit and reuse it, we will get a credit back on
But
some
field
of that.
7 had no conduit at all, correct? Because it didn't have lights now, right?
Field 7 has lights now, yes. Yeah. I believe it has conduit, like the other ones. And when we were recommended the 4 and 6, the reason we're doing that is because that comes off the same box,
Yeah.
where 7 and 8 come off the other box closer to the concession stand. And again, Field 8 has the metal poles already. Andy feels those are, it's still in good enough shape that we can get by. And hopefully this is a 45 year fix out there. So we plan on baseball and softball being around for a long time. And like I mentioned at our meeting last week, we're getting some activity. We're hearing some things of new baseball, softball happening out there. So it's exciting.
So the addition of field 7 would complement and.
Continuing to have 7 lit would.
Okay.
Right now there's poles there and there's lights. And again, last summer we didn't feel comfortable working on them at all, even trying, because we had problems the year before on field 4 when we had a game out there. The north side lights turned off right during the game and we couldn't get them back on. So
Just to refresh everybody's memory, that was what, and part of what Kemper's request that did not occur anyway.
Right.
But that was if we could get field 7, that would have helped them, correct?
Yeah.
And by having lights on the 3 fields, then Jack will be able to stagger the games better so that parking is freed up more.
We'll sure try, yes. Yeah, we can stagger games a little bit more. That 5:30 game, maybe T-ball could start maybe just even a little bit earlier than the 5:30 games, or 5:45. And then later games, we can start a little bit later. We figured out that a lot of the times is you have the early games, the parking lot's full, and we start the games right at 7. Well, those other games, sometimes parents stand around and talk with coaches and don't get out of there right away. And those later game coaches tell their kids to come a half hour before the game so we can go warm up. And there's just not enough parking for 12 games at one time in a sense, because you're gonna have both times out there. Yeah, so we gapped them a little bit more, and we're gonna try to do that again Grant shaking his head yes, so. Yeah, we understand now that that's been the problem, is the overlapping also with games.
This is to be done before the games start.
Yes.
Any other questions for Jack? I'll entertain a motion for approval of accept the base bid plus alternate bid option B from Dries Electric Company, Carroll, Iowa, for the total bid price of $437,000.
So moved.
Second.
You have first and second? Okay. There's no other discussion, we'll go ahead and vote, please.
Base,
Yes.
Fleischner,
Yes.
Seaman,
Yes.
Cox,
Yes.
Dirks,
Yes.
Haley.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, the next item on the agenda, the Downtown Streetscape Phase 10 Supplemental Services Agreement, number 1, and Randy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During the design development of Phase 10 of the streetscape project, we added 2 additional areas of streetscaping. Those were located in the northeast corner of 4th and Main. That's some additional parking to replace parking that is to be lost farther up the street. And the other is in the northwest corner of 4th and Main. And that is to mitigate some non-compliant sidewalk. During an earlier streetscape project in front of the theater, there was an area that was known to be non-compliant. And it has been there since that streetscape project. But now the Fridley Theaters are requesting that that be mitigated and made compliant with the ADA. The supplemental services agreement number 1 has been prepared to incorporate that design work into the Confluence design contract. The scope of work is what normal and customary for developing streetscape work through to the construction phase. The amount of the supplemental services agreement is $5,560, and that brings the amended design services agreement to $103,475. So unless there are any questions, I'd recommend your consideration of approval of the resolution approving the supplemental design services agreement.
This is for the jail project, correct?
That's what the northeast side is,
Northeast side
yes.
is, yeah.
Mhm.
It's getting hot in here.
It'll cool down.
Will that crosswalk change at all that's on there, will that move that at all?
No,
It's a designated crosswalk on the north end of that, going across Main Street.
there is a crosswalk on the south end at the north side of 4th Street. That will not change. And then, of course, the one at 5th Street, on the south side of 5th Street, also will not change.
What was the projected number of parking spaces? Was it 4 or 6?
I believe it was 4.
4. Okay. Are there any other questions for Randy? If not, I need a motion to approve the resolution for the supplemental services agreement number 1 to the design services agreement for the Downtown Streetscape Phase 10 project.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? If not, we'll go ahead and vote, please.
Cox,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Dirks,
Yes.
Fleischner,
Yes.
Seaman, Base. Yes. Motion is approved.
Thank you. Let's see, our next item is reports. And the first one is the Water Storage Tower Rehabilitation 2019 project, change order number 1. Randy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The third amendment to the water tower attachment option and lease agreement with Iowa RSA number 9 Limited Partnership, which is US Cellular, included installation of additional equipment on the top of the tower. That additional equipment necessitates structural modification of the railing that is currently on the tower. The amendment did include that RSA number 9 limited partnership would reimburse the city the amount of $48,200 for those structural modifications. A proposed change order number 1 has been prepared to incorporate that structural modification work into our current water tower rehabilitation contract. That price included in the proposal is the $48,200, and it also includes a contract time increase of 10 days. So the net effect on the contract is to increase it to $591,900. Unless there are any questions, I'd recommend your consideration of approval of the change order number 1 to the water storage tower rehab contract.
When do they reimburse us? Is it after the work's all done?
Yes. Mhm.
They can't pay us first and
I don't know. I
Okay.
didn't ask. They were prompt, part of that agreement also included them paying for the design work for the structural modifications
Yeah.
in the amount of $4,800. And we did invoice for that right after the agreement was signed. And about within 2 days, we had a check back.
Oh.
So they were pretty prompt in that payment.
So what if the amount is less than that? So we would invoice them for the amount.
Mhm.
So if it's 40,000 or whatever, okay. Fair enough. Any other questions for Randy? If not, I need a motion to approve change order number 1 to the water storage tower rehab contract in the amount of $48,200.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Go and vote, please.
Haley,
Yes.
Seaman, Space. Yes. Cots,
Yes.
Fleshner,
Yes.
Dirks.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. Our next item is the wastewater treatment plant disinfection improvements, change order number 2. Randy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During the construction of the wastewater treatment plant improvements, it was determined that we need to attach or connect our new effluent sampler to the plant, the existing plant SCADA system. And the cost for doing that work is $4,170. We've prepared the proposed change order number 2 to incorporate that into the current construction contract. And the effect on that, on the contract of the total change orders is an increase to $995,539.60. And unless there are any questions, I would recommend your consideration of approval of the change order number 2 to the wastewater treatment plant disinfection improvements contract.
Is it,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask if the SCADA system's going to be around for a long period of time into the foreseeable future, maybe I should ask her.
Yes, it is going to be. Mhm. It was just recently updated. Certainly, the SCADA system is an integral part of operation of the plant.
What if we don't connect it?
If you don't connect it, then our operators have to walk down to the flume, the effluent flume, and manually read the flow coming out through the plant.
Gotcha.
Everything else in the plant, SCADA is SCADA connected.
Right.
And so they can supervise everything in the plant from the office and receive the data at the office. So all functions are incorporated there.
Is it would they normally, in the process of a month, go down to check to make sure that what's reading on the SCADA system is what's actually going out, or that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they do verify
To verify.
at location, right. Mhm.
Any other questions for Randy? If not, I need a motion to approve change order number 2 to the wastewater treatment plant disinfection improvements contract in the amount of $4,170.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. There's no other discussion. We'll go ahead and vote, please.
Cots,
Yes.
Dirks,
Yes.
Space. Yes. Fleischner,
Yes.
Seaman. Yes. Haley.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
The final item under reports is to waive purchasing policy number 501 for the purchase of cable cast equipment for the Carroll Area Access Television Cat 6. Mike, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. In July of 2018, the city replaced a number of pieces of equipment for Cat 6, and this was done as the City Hall was moving out of the former government building to its temporary location. During the time that we were at the temporary location, we didn't broadcast the council meetings live, so we didn't realize that some of the equipment we did replace was not capable of allowing us to broadcast city council meetings live. Now that that's been discovered, we've worked with our previous vendor, Heartland Video Systems, to provide us a quote to both replace and install some additional equipment that allow cable meetings to be live on Cat 6. The cost of that equipment and installation is $13,104.50. I should note that the equipment that we're replacing here is over 15 years old, so it has ran its lifespan. Due to the nature of the equipment and working with Heartland Video Systems previously, staff is requesting that the council waive purchasing policy 501 to purchase equipment from Heartland Video Systems directly without competitive quotes. And I would note that this is a budgeted item in the 2020 budget. With that, I entertain any questions the council would have and request consideration of waiving purchase policy 501 related to requirements for competitive quotes and approve the purchase of cable cast equipment and installation services from Heartland Video Systems, the amount not to exceed $13,104.50. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the council has this evening.
I think that was a desire of us to do that eventually anyway, and I think somebody asked a question either last week why we weren't, and lo and behold, Mike shows me this, hey, we can do that, so we'll get it done. Are there any other questions for Mike? If not, I need a motion to waive purchase policy number 501 related to the requirement for competitive quotes and approve the purchase of cable cast equipment and installation services from Heartland Video Systems in the amount of not to exceed $13,104.50.
So moved. Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? We'll go and vote, please.
Haley,
Yes.
Fleischner,
Yes.
Dirks,
Yes.
Seaman. Yes. Cots,
Yes.
Space. Yes. Motion is approved.
Thank you. I trust everyone's read the committee reports and monthly activity reports. I'd like to congratulate the library for winning a Government Services Award last night. It was nice, and we have amongst us the Citizen of the Year Award. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. And the Heritage Award from Bruner and Bruner. Thank you. Yeah, that's like super extra good company today. Wow. Are there any comments from the City Council? From the City Manager?
Not this evening.
If not, we'll move into the budget work session. So if we want to get our budget book, just gonna take a break for a second, or 5:44 or so. Do you wanna go? Oh, Randy, yeah. Randy, yeah.
It's a long winter night.
Fish writing story. Unrelated stories, the right one to say.
Back at lunch too, Randy.
Nobody's just staying.
Thanks again for the nice interview today, it means a lot.
Whenever you're ready, Randy, we'll get started.
Okay.
Or you even listening to time.
Put your work. The first part of the Public Works budget begins in the general fund.
I'll see you tomorrow. See if I get some Nathan's covered.
The budget cover sheets begin on tab E, page 40. And the detail of the budget is located under tab G, page 86, and tab J, page 18, and tab L, page 128. So it's kind of spread out in the general fund. But it does include some individual operations: street construction, road maintenance, street lighting, traffic services, public works administration, city garage, central business district, and streets transfer. The initiatives that are planned for 2021 or included in the proposed budget include $8,900 for the Quiet Zone Study update, which was a priority item from your November 4th goal-setting report, and also continuation of progress on the pedestrian curb. That is continuing the transition plan to construct or reconstruct curb ramps. And actually, in 2 of the capital improvement projects this year, the streets project and the water main project, we do have 46 curb ramps included in those projects. The transition plan, if you recall, envisioned the reconstruction of about 50 ped ramps per year. So we have, through other projects, since the transition plan was adopted, met or exceeded that 50 per year.
Randy, that's like 50,000 yearly budget, right?
Yes, it is. Okay, continuing on into the budget itself, the fees included in the budget are for right-of-way and easement use fees, where the city does do work on the streets for private individuals. If they want a driveway built, the city does the work on the curb drop, various things like that. And we found that the product that's achieved is much better than before the right-of-way easement use permit system went into place. Now, we will present to you a fee increase proposal, a minor fee increase proposal, and that will come later after the budget's adopted, is so adopted, to be effective in July of 2020. Within the current code of ordinance, of course, we have a right-of-way easement use section, and it has fees in it currently, and they're listed in front of you. Those fees are set fairly low, and it was done that way for a purpose, and that was to get compliance. And we have excellent compliance since the initiation of this easement use permit. But we are kind of recommending creeping those fees up a little bit and maybe get a little closer to what costs are, but really only 3 of them. The replacement of curb and gutter just increased that $5 per linear foot, and that would roughly equate some of the bid pricing we're getting on that. So that one is up to the point where it's probably adequate, at least in the market. The other that we would recommend increasing is pavement restoration from $45 a square yard, $50 a square yard. That one is still far below market value or market price.
Does that include concrete, or is that just the labor work to prep it up to the concrete?
Nope, that's concrete included. Now, the way these work, whoever's doing the work in the street, if it's a patch, for example, a sewer replacement, the contractor for the homeowner removes the pavement, and then the city moves back in and fills the trench and replaces the pavement. So we're recommending that. Now, for example, if you want to compare that to recent bid price, they are running about $92 a square yard. So it's significantly below that, but once again, we're getting compliance on these. So incrementing it up to where it's a little bit more, I guess, or if you want it more, that's okay too, but this would be our recommendation. Curb penetration, that's primarily for some pumps going out into the street. They're currently at 35, we're recommending going to $50 each. Utility trench granular backfill is a new item that we would propose. Throughout history, there's been a lot of research done on how to recompact a utility trench so the street doesn't settle. And it's changed through the various research projects. Currently, the market is to refill it with a granular material, and actually a specifically graded granular material. So we have started to do that at no charge to see if it'll work, and it does work. But the granular material is kind of expensive. We did crush some concrete to the gradation that the granular material, so it would meet the granular material gradation, and use that. But we found out that we could purchase virgin material cheaper than we could crush concrete. And the primary reason is to get that gradation, there's so much loss in the crushing operation that you have to dispose of, that, and they charge you by the ton anyway. So you're paying for the tons you throw away and the tons you keep. So we have since been purchasing that graded material. And we're recommending that, that the backfill material price be $25 per ton. Now, for example, on a street cut, if a sewer line or water line were to be cut all the way across the street at a 3-foot trench, 3-foot wide trench, 5 feet deep, say for instance, water line depth, at $25 a ton, the bill would be about $600. It takes a lot of tons to fill a hole like that. And we have filled some deep sewers with it and spent a lot filling it. But you get a street patch that's permanent, basically. And that's really the goal, is to not to have to replace it. So that'll be a recommendation coming forward later in before July.
So you don't use that spray foam like they use for driveways, that's probably not enough.
We don't,
No, okay.
no.
Is that something we can get with Randy, or
What's that?
the granular backfill, is that something local, or?
Yeah, it's a crushed material that we have brought in. I think we purchased it locally, Tiefenthaler and Arcadia limestone. Continuing on, within the general fund portion of the Public Works budget, personnel services, we fund 1.9 full-time equivalent personnel. The capital outlay, we're recommending, $10,000. That is primarily for the purchase of pedestrian curb ramp detectable warning panels. What we do is purchase those panels, the particular panel that we want, by pallets, and then we resell those to anyone that builds a ped ramp so that they get the detectable warning plates that we desire. And also we supply those to our street resurfacing projects. So in those 46 ped ramps that are in the 2 contracts this year, the city will be supplying those detectable warnings, so it will not be a bid item. I mean, construction of the ramp will be, the detectable warning will not be. And we do that because we have experimented with several different types of detectable warnings. And those have been concrete, composite, plastic, and then we finally settled on cast iron. And they're the only ones that stay compliant, that hold up. And they're a little more expensive. They're about 150% of any of the concrete or composites. But once again, it gets that product that's going to stay in place and remain compliant. Because as you walk around, if you see a concrete one or a composite one that has domes missing from the ped ramp, once a dome is gone, they're non-compliant. That's the law.
Do we have some of those plastic ones, these composite ones,
Yeah.
are there, where would, I'm kind of curious, where would one be at? Do you know of one, or?
Well, there's plastic composites. I can't think of any offhand on the
Okay.
plastic composites. You can tell them. I mean, they're shiny in there.
Yeah.
We do have some that are more like a concrete material composite, and they were in the original streetscape areas downtown on Adams and Main and that. And the problem really, there's two problems with it. More and more sidewalks are being cleaned by skid loaders, and they just tear the domes right off. But we've also noticed that we have taken a detectable warning panel that's covered with ice and snow and chipped the ice off, and the domes come right off with it. So, some of the products didn't work. We tried the cheaper ones, and they just didn't work. And so we've moved towards supplying the ones that we want, and then we sell them at cost or supply them in our public contracts. Transfers, $50,000, that's the transfer for this transition plan sidewalks, pedestrian curb ramps. So unless there are any questions, that's about all I have for the general fund portion of Public Works. The next area is the road use tax, and the budget cover sheet, it begins on tab E, page 64, and then the detailed portion of the budget is tab N, page 142. Of course, in the road use tax fund, the monies in that fund are restricted to being used for road purposes. And actually, it's construction, maintenance, and supervision of public streets. So fairly restricted use of the funds. Within the road use tax budget, there is road maintenance, snow removal, street cleaning, administration, and transfers. The 2021 initiatives funded partially by the road use tax fund will be the street resurfacing 2020 project, which is currently under design. Actually, the plans are submitted. Street resurfacing 2021 design, and then a portion of the street maintenance facility construction. Within the budget, the revenue is primarily from the road use tax fund from the state. That is for fiscal year 21, $127 per capita. Then the second largest contribution for revenue at $148,442, that's a transfer from the employee benefits fund. And that pays for the benefits for the 7.9 full-time employees in the road use tax fund. So it's really support to the fund. Total revenue at $1,432,623. That's it.
Can I interrupt with a question real
Sure.
quick?
You bet.
Ms. Kobe Weaver, you mentioned once how important census data is, and we hear about per capita for the road use tax from the state. Is that where we're seeing that tied back in?
Yes, this is where the census count matters.
I appreciate you mentioning that and letting the public know. Good to tie it in.
Fill out your census form.
I love your census form. Thank you, Randy.
Okay. I had mentioned 7.9 full-time equivalent employees are funded through the road use tax fund. The capital outlay is envisioned or recommended to be the replacement of the skid steer loader and development of a pavement management system. The city has for years received data collected automatically for all of the streets in the city. The DOT had done that. And so there's a history of deterioration of the streets. Now the DOT has changed their mind and they don't want to fund that anymore. So it's voluntary among the cities and counties if they want that data automatically collected automatically. The real advantage to the automated data collection is that it's impartial. I mean, it collects data on every street exactly the same way. The alternative, and many pavement management systems use it, is manual data collection, where the street's driven by a person and they observe and record the conditions of the street. And those, it's okay if the same person does it all the way through town, but the automated data collection measures every crack the same on one street as the next street. So I think it's a valuable tool, and by collecting it every 2 to 3 years, then you begin to get a history of deterioration of any segment of roadway. So we have recommended that we continue that data collection, pay for it. It's about $6,600 for all of our streets per 3 years, every 3 years. So, and then the rest of that recommended funding is for the analysis portion of the data that we have. So creation of the actual pavement management system as opposed to data collection, which we've been doing historically. Transfers, we're recommending $250,000. That's to that street 2020 street resurfacing 2020 project. And if you recall, that's West Street from 7th to 18th and Grant Road from the Middle Raccoon River to the railroad. We actually have a resident meeting coming up tomorrow night on that. So, and you were all invited. Total expenditures for fiscal year 21 at $1,363,811. And that gives us actually revenues over expenditures of $68,812. So the expenditures, annual expenditures in the road use tax fund are coinciding with the annual revenues. There isn't a lot of money left over every year for equipment replacement, the larger pieces of equipment. A medium duty truck at $175,000. A motor grader or a 4-wheel drive loader at over $250,000. Not a lot of funding left annually for that type of purchase or for funding some additional capital maintenance like a streets resurfacing 2020 project. So we're converging on those dollars to being used for operation and maintenance as opposed to capital expenditures. However, there is a fund balance of about $1.6 million that increased a little bit from last year. It's something, and certainly it's available for use, and for supporting, carryover balance in the fund.
The trucks, the snowplows, how often, are they in staggered rotation as to when you replace those?
Yes, they are staggered. In fact, we have staggered all of the capital equipment. But it's not on a fixed rotating year. I guess what I recommend and what I do every year, if a truck unit 22 or 34 comes up for, on the schedule, then it's, will that truck last another year, or does it need to be traded? And we've been fairly successful in that. And we do that with all the equipment in the public works. We did get caught with one piece of equipment that it didn't work. You know, they thought it would go another year, and it was expensive year for it. So sometimes you get caught a lot. We extend it as much as we can. But whenever you extend that piece of equipment a year, you've got 10 pieces that follow it. And can they continue to be extended year after year? So those are decisions that, you know, are made annually, to try to minimize cost, I guess, and, you know, maximize the value of the fleet without getting to a point where the whole fleet it needs replaced in 1 year.
All of a sudden we're replacing 8 trucks, and, you know, we could have done 1 or 2 the year
Yeah.
before, okay.
We're not Ankeny, we can't replace 8 trucks a year.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, otherwise, that kind of covers the road use tax expenditures, unless there are any further questions. The next portion of the budget is capital projects. The budget cover sheet begins on tab E, page 67, and the detail portion of the budget is under tab U, page 191. Within the capital projects, we've got 3 sections: streets, corridor of commerce, and maintenance facility. And of course, the initiatives include those. The street resurfacing project of 2020, which is also a priority program of your November 4th goal-setting session. The downtown streetscape phase 10, this is where it will be funded. And the street maintenance facility project. The revenues for fiscal year 21 include $600,000. That's the federal aid revenue for the West Street project. Actually, it's swamp revenue, which is the DOT has graciously decided to provide local entities with state funds, and the DOT is expending the federal funds. And they made a dollar for dollar swap. And it's a real benefit to the local agencies because many of the federal requirements for contracting do not apply to state funding, or they do apply to federal funding. It's not complete elimination of federal requirements, but a lot of them are reduced, and our dollars should go a little bit farther in construction as a result of that. But the downside is some people in the DOT didn't support that. And so they started charging us for data collection in the pavement management system. And that, it's probably tied together in its actual fallout, but that's life. The other portion of the funding, $900,000, is a combination of general fund, road use tax, local option sales tax, and sewer utility fund, or excuse me, stormwater utility fund. Expenditures, the capital outlay anticipated does include the sidewalk, pedestrian curb ramps at $50,000, the street rehabilitation 2020 project at $1,436,550, and then begin design of the street rehab project for 2021 at $75,000. The next area of the capital improvement fund is Corridor of Commerce, and that is actually for Phase 10 construction at $1.2 million. That will be funded through the loan program in this fiscal year is when it's anticipated to be done. And then $25,000 in funding to continue the design work on Streetscape Phase 11. Now, Streetscape Phase 11 in the capital improvement plan that you received is currently scheduled for fiscal year 23-24. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The main one being the method of funding. If you're to continue the historical method of funding, the water fund has to get built back up before you can borrow from it. The other is you've got decisions to make as far as the scope of that project. It's primarily located on Highway 30 between Grant Road and Clark and west and Highway 71. There's a lot of options in there for streetscape project work. The one lighting probably is a given that you'd want to do, but the construction of sidewalks is a big issue. Certainly through those areas, sidewalk construction is an imposition on the adjacent properties, huge imposition. But on the other hand, if you desire to have a corridor, sidewalk construction is important. So the preliminary plans will come to you early, well before any construction is even scheduled for your consideration on those, the scope of that project. Otherwise, the last part of the capital improvement portion of the budget is the street maintenance facility. And of course, the funding has been identified to date on that. This budget, fiscal year 21, includes the expenditure, and it actually includes total construction expenditure for it. Actually, the total funding now stands, or is projected to stand with interest at $5,043,000. So the expenditure currently stands at, without contingency, at about 4.7 million. So there's a little bit of contingency in there for construction.
When were you gonna finalize that they can start construction maybe in the fall? Is that what the
No,
charter was?
actually, that is scheduled for a letting in March or April,
Oh, okay, all right.
and then
Faster than I thought, okay.
can begin anytime after that.
Okay.
Plans are practically completed. We have a couple of things that are being worked on, and then they'll be complete.
Who's the architect?
The architect on that is FEH Design. Are there any other questions on the capital improvement portion of the budget?
I have one on
Yep.
letting out bids for this. When we let out those bids, they're set for a project date of initiation, correct? I mean, what I'm getting at is, you let the bid out and you say this project's to begin, say, June 1st. All right, is that how that goes? Or is there a range? In other words, could someone be encouraged to bid something that would be 3 months later, past when they've got some other project done. And maybe
Okay,
they would be willing to go for less money.
we could contract either way, and some contracts do have a start date. Most likely a late start date, so that you set up and then determine the number of days it takes to build the project, and then you get to your end date. Now, most of our local contracts do not have a start date in them. They only have a completion date. So the contractor, as he bids, if he has other work and needs to delay the start on it, that's generally acceptable to the city. But he has to complete it on time anyway. So he has to include in his bid, you know, if he's gonna have to delay the start, then work extra time or pay extra for labor to get it done on time. And that all goes into how he calculates his bid versus the next contractor that may start on it right after the contract's signed. But we put that on them usually. With our interest being a completion date. And then you decide how long it's gonna take you to do it.
What's our expected completion date on that, do you know?
It's about a year, it's about May of 21, I
May of
believe.
21, okay.
Randy, I'm looking at Mike's, our planning session work plan. And there, I know we've gone over the design plan in the past. And we don't need a work session, I doubt. But are you going to run through the plans with us at any point
Sure,
before the bids are let?
yes, there is, certainly, we would bring the plans forward. You know, there is a requirement for a public hearing on the plans. And then your adoption of the plans. And that'll come well before letting of the project.
Okay,
And
so
then-
we will see detailed plans, not just, okay.
Yep.
The verbiage, okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll have that before we let the bid out.
Yes,
Correct, yeah.
we'll probably have that close to the time we begin advertising. So there will be a period of time, if there are any alterations to the plan as a result of the public hearing, they can be incorporated into it before bid.
Before the
So
bid, right.
contractors are aware of those.
And we certainly have preliminary plans available, so I mean, certainly if anyone, the council or the public
Yeah.
wants to look at them.
I've just had a few people ask me, and my memory, you know, I told them I could not remember how much cold storage, you know, heated, whatever.
Mhm.
And so it was just, I could not remember the details.
And those details would probably be in that public hearing.
So I could send
Yeah.
people in also,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Sure.
thank you. Okay, great.
You bet. Any further questions on capital projects? If not, the next portion of the budget is the water utility fund. The cover sheets begin on tab E, page 72. And the actual detail of the budget is tab W, page 216 in your budget book. The water utility family funds includes the operation and depreciation, capital improvements, and meter deposit fund. Within the operation, we have administration, the operation of the water treatment plant, the high service pump station, wells, distribution system, accounts, GIS, and transfers. The initiatives in the water utility fund for fiscal year 2021 are recommended to be some fire hydrant replacements. Those are done by city personnel. Some fire hydrant painting, which we'll try to get contracted. We have 195 out of 483 fire hydrants left to paint.
They're not all, that's what I was gonna say, they're not all painted yet then.
Right, 195 aren't.
You're still doing that color coordination thing, so you know,
Yes.
okay, alright.
And the reason these aren't painted, they have lead paint on it. And the lead paint has to be, as you remove the lead paint, it has to be captured, air monitored, and all that. So that'll be by contract.
So don't leak the fire hydrants.
The unpainted ones. The painted ones are fine.
Painted ones are fine, okay, good.
Water main replacement, which is, the design is underway. Water tower improvements, completion of what we've got going right now. And then the well construction. And that well construction is the replacement of well 11, which is located at the south end of Rolling Hills Park. The replacement is anticipated to be right adjacent to the current well location.
How close can they get to that? Can they drill within 2 feet of it? I mean,
No, it'll probably be about 25 feet.
is there a set requirement from nothing? Okay.
No, there isn't. And we have consulted a geotechnical person, and they have indicated that they're comfortable with the location that we want to place it.
It's the one that had the correct casement on it.
Yes. Let's see. Okay, within the budget, the majority of the revenue is certainly charges for service, that's metered water. Actually, we're anticipating the metered water revenue to be $1.4 million out of that total, and then there's some other miscellaneous revenues in there. Last rate increase on July 1 of 2017 for the water utility fund. The other financing sources are the TIF repayments to the water utility fund for the streetscape loans. Expenditures, personnel services, 7.1 full-time equivalent personnel funded from the water fund. Capital outlay includes only $10,000 for meter replacement. You recall through the last 4 years, the city's been going through a comprehensive meter replacement program. That is substantially completed, and the cost on that was about $1.1 million for complete meter replacement. Transfers include transfers for payment of insurance, the depreciation funding, and then capital improvement projects. And that leaves a fund balance projected in the water utility fund at the end of fiscal year 21 of $952,789. So that, as mentioned earlier, that's not enough to support a loan in and of itself, to support a loan for an additional streetscape project. Hopefully that will build over the years. There are a few capital improvement projects in the capital improvement program, but not a significant number from here on out for the water utility fund. Okay. The next part of the fund is the depreciation. The transfer from the water utility is $50,000, and there are no expenditures recommended from the depreciation fund for fiscal year 2021, and that resulting in a balance of $967,891. The depreciation fund was established, I think, in 1996 when the water treatment plant was built, and it has been at $50,000 a year, and we have primarily recommended expenditure of that to cover equipment that was originally included in the water treatment plant construction. And we have expended some funding from that depreciation in the recent past for the filter rehabilitation. So both pressure filters at the plant were rehabbed, and that contract was funded through this depreciation fund. So it's equipment originally within the plant has been the historical recommendation. Capital improvements, the funding is certainly from the water utility revenues. And the capital improvements include that water main replacement for 2020, which is currently under design. And if you recall, we did not perform a water main. We performed a small water main project last year. Only got one bid, so doubled up on them this year at $1 million, and we'll see what the bids are. That's about all we can do to try to get competitive bidding.
When do you expect to get those?
Those should be in probably the end of April.
Oh, okay.
And then the well construction, pretty much on the same timeline as a water main project at $650,000. Of course, the fund balance ending in capital improvement is small because there's money placed in and then expended out for the capital improvement projects. The water meter deposit fund is the last of the water funds. That receives money from non-owner occupied accounts, water accounts. There is a deposit required, and this fund receives that and then disperses the money if that renter moves out and closes their account. So it's really pretty much money in, money out, currently setting on about $45,000 in that fund. So are there any questions on the water utility fund
How many meters you got left? You know?
to do?
Yeah,
About 5.
about 5.
Yeah, I think we did one of those 8, you know, and I think they might have written one off, but I think there's 5 left.
5
And
left.
certainly they're the more difficult ones, and we'll address those individually.
Gotcha, thank you.
Okay, the next part of the Public Works budget is the sewer utility fund, and the cover sheets begin on tab E, page 75. And the detailed budget is, under tab X on page 231. Sewer utility fund, also a family of funds, is a family of funds. They're the operation fund, of course, and depreciation and capital improvements, similar to the water utility. Within the operation, the funds, administration, the water treatment plant operation, the collection system operation, accounts, and transfers. The initiative for this next fiscal year is continue the analysis of copper compliance. That has been initiated and is underway. Currently, the copper compliance deadline is October of 2021. Certainly the work, there is work going on, but none of it's been very fruitful. There have been about 3 different exercises or rocks turned over in order to work our way towards a solution to this copper compliance issue. The first was to perform a stream study, a generalized stream study on a discharge to the Middle Raccoon River waste load allocation. And it did give a little bit of relief or it would, if we did that, give a little bit of relief in the effluent limit for copper. Not enough for consistent compliance by the plant, but a little. The second exercise was breaking down the city into 10 watersheds and sampling the water for copper from each of the individual watersheds to see if we could start determining if there was one area that was contributing more copper than another area. And there wasn't. They were substantially the same throughout the 10 watersheds. So the next exercise, which is currently underway, is called BLM, It's a biotic ligand model, and it's a model used to determine waste loads allocations. The DNR doesn't always use it, but they consented to use it in our case, but it does require extensive data collection. And we have been under 10 months of extensive data collection. We have 2 months remaining, and then we'll submit that data to the DNR for that model analysis. Now they ran some on some of our preliminary, like our 6-month data, and there wasn't too much relief in the effluent requirement. But it's another step in trying to solve this copper compliance issue. The data collection includes certainly our plant effluent, then the receiving stream upstream of the plant and downstream of the plant. So we have a whole profile of constituents that are tested every month in those 3 locations that will feed this BLM model. That'll be coming up within the next probably 3 or 4 months, at least the results of that model.
So to be compliant with that deadline, we just have to have a solution in place? Or do we actually have to have the copper removal system in place?
That is the deadline in the permit.
Alright.
Now, is it subject to negotiation? We don't know. Is it subject to us probably trying to negotiate it? Probably. To put it in perspective, we've pulled permits from several cities that have copper limits that are the same as ours. And we did directly contact 3 of the cities. They have the copper limits similar to ours, and they have a compliance schedule. So we contacted 3 of the cities directly, and those 3 cities were similar in size to us. Oskaloosa, Webster City, which are in the group of 18, and then we also contacted Mason City. All have the exact same effluent concentration requirements that we have. None of them will violate. They currently meet those requirements. And this was from their wastewater superintendents. And their superintendent said, what are you gonna do? Good luck with that. And for example, Mason City has our 0.016 as a effluent limits. Their influent copper to their plant is 0.008. So it's half of their effluent limit. So they comply already. And we don't. Our influent copper limits range from 0.009, which is compliant, to about 0.02, which exceeds the limit by quite a ways. And we're kind of all over the board. There's no consistency in compliance at this time.
So we should shower every other day?
Well, just quit showering with pennies in your pocket.
So there's nobody in the state that's getting this figured out?
We have not found them. We're looking, and we've not found another city that's in our position that has solved this problem. Now,
There's others in our same position though?
well, we haven't found that
Oh,
in our position. We because there are databases, you can find what cities' effluent limits are. And that's how we found this series of cities. There are more. We just contacted those 3 because they were relatively close to our population. Most of them are quite smaller than us that have those limits. And a lot of aerated lagoons, and they have no way of meeting if they're currently exceeding the copper limit. Not with an aerated lagoon.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Randy, we talked about this. Those 3 cities you mentioned have the exact same copper discharge as
Yes.
us. And so the interesting part that we had talked about was it's a little ironic that you have 3 other cities in Iowa discharging different rivers that have the same exact limits based on the fact that these limits are supposed to be based on your local conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it you have 3 cities that have the exact same limits? I mean, that's suspect. So how is the DNR coming up with these? Is it kind of arbitrarily being determined? I think there's some avenues we have to have discussions there on too.
And we were surprised to learn exactly that their concentration limits were exactly the same as ours in a wide variety of, certainly Oskaloosa and Webster City are on different rivers, as well as Mason City. And actually Scranton down the road has an aerated lagoon. They have the same copper limits that we do. Anyway, that copper will be front and center here for a while. And hopefully we'll get it solved. We've also looked into solutions to it, and they're all bad. Filtration, which is tremendously expensive and not reliable. And then there's precipitation by chemical and polymer. Then you deal with the sludge from the copper, and then that copper sludge pollutes your wastewater sludge, and it restricts you from applying it to farmland. So there are not a lot of good solutions to that.
How many years have we been excreting that amount of copper into the?
Well, we've been consistent in our copper concentration within the city. The limits are the things that change. We had limits of we have a limit of 0.076, and we comply with all that. Even, average day, maximum day, we have complied. But when they reduce the limit to 0.016, then we can't comply without trying to do something. But it's the limit that's changed. We don't have.
So what we're discharging is staying consistent.
Yeah.
So whatever life that we're killing with the copper is already dead.
Yeah,
Been dead for years. It's
Sure,
not gonna
it is.
come back.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. That's one of the arguments. The other is we don't have high copper in our system either. The copper is low. The limit is just that much
So you
lower.
just change it, yeah.
We comply with the drinking water standard for copper. Always have, always will. But it's 75 times the limit for wastewater effluent. And
We can drink more than we can flush down the toilet.
And I don't know if you know the number, but the EPA has a limit for copper discharge on a normal situation. This is just many times lower than a regular plant would face.
yeah, I'm not sure the number, but right.
Is this a national thing or statewide?
Oh, I think it's probably national. Most of the limits, well, actually, the limits are set by the EPA. The constituents that are governed are set by the EPA, and our state DNR has primacy, so they administer the federal program in Iowa. Now, copper is one of the limits, one of the constituents that the EPA has listed. And the way the limit is theoretically determined is you run the waste load allocation on the receiving stream. So the factors in the receiving stream, including flow, pH, temperature, those are all input. And then it's supposed to create a limit, not only for copper, but for all of your discharge constituents. So that's what it has created for copper for us, is that limit. One of the things that is running against us is our stream flow isn't very high. I mean, we're way up in the watershed. The Middle Raccoon River is small. So there is not a lot of dilution potential to it. So, but the surprising thing is what Mike said. Mason City is on a pretty good sized river, and they've got the same effluent concentration limit that we do. How do you figure that? Well, unless it's just some kind of a uniform application. And that's why we're we're pursuing this BLM to have analyzed the specific condition of our Middle Raccoon River to see if that makes a difference in this copper limit.
I was gonna say that studies do have that in.
Well, we've got 2 more months of data collection for the BLM, and then we'll forward that to the DNR, and they'll run it.
Okay.
So, whatever their response time is on running it, we'll get it back.
Randy, I wanted to ask, are we enforcing the limit established by the EPA, or has Iowa set its own higher standard? Years ago, I read that Iowa has some of the strictest water standards in the nation, and that we even surpass some of the standards set by the EPA, or is, maybe that's not true anymore? Do you know?
I don't know for sure, but I believe the conversations have been, as the Washington trips have been made. I think the copper has been carried to Washington 4 times, I believe. And what the responses have been from the EPA is turning it back to working with the DNR. So it appears that the EPA is accepting what the Iowa DNR is regulating. And so I would guess that it has to meet the EPA requirements in
Or
order.
we can surpass them, we can be.
That probably could. Yeah, I'm not sure if we do or not.
Okay, I was just curious,
Yeah.
thanks.
Your interpretation, Carolyn, is the same as I have, is that we would have to be more stringent in the state of Iowa than the federal
Yeah, we can be
guidelines would be
more stringent, but not
less.
less, is what I was, this is quite a few years ago.
And one thing to point out,
It's interesting.
while some of these cities have copper limits in Iowa, some of the permits, there are other permits that do not have a copper limit, like we're facing.
Yeah.
So, they're, obviously the DNR is looking at something in setting these copper limits for various communities. I'm not certain what that is.
I'm not, I can give you an observation from the history of it. I was working here when our first copper limit was established. It was a complete surprise. We had permit, a wastewater treatment operation permit reissued every 5 years, or theoretically. Back then they were doing it actually. And we received a permit with copper limits in it that we had never had a copper limit before. So for whatever reason, it began. And in some of the early conversations, it was kind of precipitated by the fact that we had an industrial contributor that had the possibility of contributing copper. They weren't. They were treating on site and not contributing it to the city, but because the contributor was there, I gathered that that's what may have triggered the initial copper limit. And the contributor is no longer here. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, it's a possibility as to why it got initially put into our permit. Okay. Let's continuing on. The charges for service in the sewer utility fund and the sewer rental, that's by code, out of the total charges for service revenue, about $2 million is directly from the rate schedule, or anticipated to be. The last sewer utility fund rate increase was July 1st of 2016. In the sewer utility fund, we have 6.1 full-time equivalent personnel, and the capital outlay includes cleaning of the lagoon twice a year at an estimated cost of $75,000. And then transfers at $880,000 include insurance payment, debt payment, which is $706,000, and then depreciation, capital improvement at $100,000. that's the copper projection for copper compliance continuation. And we do have 5, including next fiscal year, we have 5 debt payments left at approximately $700,000 apiece. And then that plant will be paid off. And it was actually built in 2005, so it got kind of old, kind of fast. And so in the fund balance, we're anticipating an ending balance in the sewer utility fund of $3,886,720. Let's see. In the depreciation fund, in the sewer utility fund, depreciation was initiated after construction of the plant. $35,000 a year transferred from the sewer utility fund to depreciation. Once again, we would recommend plant equipment that was originally constructed with the plant for funding from the depreciation. We have not funded any to date from anything to date from the depreciation fund. There has been some minor plant equipment repair, a couple of minor replacements. We funded those out of the operating budget. Capital improvements, again, that's transferred from the sewer utility fund. Fiscal year 21, we're anticipating $100,000, and that's for that continued copper analysis, I guess. If we get into copper removal construction, the dollars go up significantly.
That's where the fund balance goes down.
Yeah. Because you're facing copper compliance and you're facing nutrient reduction compliance. There were 3, there was DO and disinfection, but that's being constructed now, and that will be in compliance by April 1st. We do have nutrient reduction. We've submitted the report, provided a compliance schedule of 5 years, which hasn't been approved yet, but we're in the process now of altering or experimenting with the process out there to see if we can meet that nutrient reduction without any additional construction. We have a preliminary estimate of additional construction, if it has to go that way, of I think it's about $1 million for additional tank construction. Same process, vertical loop reactor, biological process for it, but we're trying to adjust the process we have to incorporate that total nitrogen removal and phosphorus removal. And the vertical loop reactor process is well suited for adjustments. It really works well at making adjustments to that. And then they're getting some pretty good results. We just want to make sure that they're consistent, that we don't go a few years and then say, foul, now we have to build something. But it's looking pretty good, cautiously optimistic, I guess. And then, of course, copper compliance, if it's construction, it's either filtration or precipitation, and then dealing with that. The residual is both, actually. So your capital improvement program does include $1 million in next fiscal year for copper. That's, I don't know, it's just a place to put that, and that can be subject to change. Any other questions on wastewater treatment? Last portion of the public works budget is stormwater utility. It'll include the operation fund and a capital improvement fund. The cover sheets begin on tab E, page 78, and the detail portion of the budget is tab Y, page 241. The charge for services are fees set by ordinance. Those fees are projected to yield about $250,000 in revenue next fiscal year. Those fees were established, I believe they were the original fees established. I don't believe they've ever been increased. And that was about 2004, I think, is when that ordinance, stormwater utility fund was established. The expenditures include a $100,000 transfer to capital project streets. We do that consistently because in every street project, there's some storm sewer that has to be, or storm sewer inlets that are rebuilt or replaced. So it's just kind of an annual support to the street resurfacing project. Fund balance at the end of fiscal year 21 projected to be $987,504. That's beginning to build, but there have been a couple of projects that have come up, and they've been discussed a little bit. If you'll recall, one down on Southgate Road, Southdale Drive, down to the Middle Raccoon River. There's a little low point flooding up on Southgate Road, Southdale Drive. And of course, the anticipated cost of that improvement would be about $1 3/4 million. So we're not there to fund it with cash. The other is the Maple Street, Anthony Street to the Middle Raccoon River. I think a few of you talked to a resident there. That's about $2 2/4 million to upgrade that. So once again, we're not there with cash funding. There's other options, but those are a couple of storm sewer projects, and storm sewer projects are expensive. I mean, they're disruptive. You remove pavement, you relocate everything in its way, and then replace it, and they're costly.
Go ahead.
Are you're referring to the intersection of East Valley Drive and South Maple, Randy?
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks.
Mhm.
We've got our sights set on these and just gotta bank up money.
Yeah, unless you want to fund them in another manner, and that's entirely up to you.
Do we have any future street resurfacing projects that are going to be occurring in that area? To pull funds over for something along that line? I mean,
There's nothing currently projected.
in the next 2 or 3 years or so?
No. Those couple of streets are residential streets. They're in pretty good condition. There are others that are higher priority as far as street condition.
So some of these, like Southdale and South Maple, do you have plans that would reduce some of that flooding? Do you have any preliminary ideas what we would need to do to change that?
We really don't. The Southgate Road, Southdale Drive one, the watershed's completely developed.
Yeah.
Or is being developed. The entire watershed. So there
a lot of
really
surface
is.
area for absorption.
Mm-hmm. It'll get worse. There is more, like say, impervious area being constructed. And that's good on one hand, but it increases stormwater runoff. We just have to deal with it. And again, then the area down at Maple Street, Anthony Street, Valley Drive, that one, the watershed also completely developed. And there has been recently, of course, with the expansion in that area, some additional impervious area. Probably had some impact on it.
Do these areas usually have something once a year that they flood? Maybe twice a year?
Once a year down on Southdale Drive, kind of once a year, maybe sometimes twice. The one on Maple and Anthony and Valley, it's really not a property damage flooding issue. It doesn't pond and flood into anyone's basement, but it is fast runoff. I mean, it comes pretty quickly because the watershed is small, but it's a lot of impervious area.
So is there one that you would say is worse than the other?
Well, for property damage,
Yeah,
probably the South Dale Drive one.
okay.
That's the one that is more likely to result in property damage.
That's maybe one that we would probably maybe look at before it gets worse. People in our community get affected. And it could be nice to get that fixed sometime too. Okay.
Any other questions on stormwater utility or any part of the public works? That's the extent of the public works budget.
I do just want to thank you for keeping these two storm sewer hotspots at top of mind and keeping them in front of us as we'll keep them in front of you.
Sure.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you very much, Randy.
You bet.
I'm gonna take like a 5-minute break. Does somebody want to go to the restroom and finish up then after that?
15 minutes, right, Mike?
Try to keep it at 15 minutes.
How's that, Jack Wardell, 15?
A couple minutes and then we'll be back.